Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to online classes for the grade 6 in the subject science. Dear boys, today we are going to continue our lesson 1, that is cell theory. We are studying this lesson from the chapter 2, cells, from the pages 88 and 89. We are going to continue with these pages. Let's see what are the learning objectives of the today's lesson. Here we will be going to know about how are cells organized, what are the different types of tissues, organ and organ systems, and at the last we will be going to know about human circulatory systems. Here boys, we will be going to talk about the cells organization, and in that we will be going to know the different things, namely cell, tissue, organ and organ system. So here many cell organisms are organized in cells, tissues, organs and organ systems. When you talk about the cells, particularly animals and plants are many celled organisms. Animals are made up of many kinds of cells. We are made up of blood cells, bone cells, skin cells and many others. A plant also has different cells in its roots, stems and leaves. Moving to the further part where you are going to talk about the tissue, where in our body a single skin cell or blood cell doesn't work alone. Cells work together in groups called as tissues. In other words, the tissue is a group of similar cells that work together carrying out certain functions, particular job. For example, skin cells work together as skin tissue that covers and protects our body. Other kinds of tissue in animals' body include muscle, bone, nerve and blood. Plant cells are organized into tissues. For example, leaves of plants are made up of tissues that help the plant make food. Also here, the different types of tissues, particularly muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue and nerve tissue. Here you can see them in the different figures of connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue and nervous tissue. So animals are mostly comprised of 4 types of tissue, in which muscle tissue is made up of cells and fibers that move bones, pump blood and push substances through the digestive system. Bone, cartilage, tendons, fat and blood are connective tissue. Nerve tissue carries messages throughout the body, whereas the examples of epithelial tissue, which includes the outer layer of our skin cells and the cells lining the digestive system. When we talk about the organs, throughout our body, tissues are grouped together so they can work together. So we can say about the organ, an organ is a group of tissue that work together doing certain functions, certain jobs. Or we can say an organ is a group of two or more types of tissue that work together to carry out one specific function. Here, if you talk about the roots, stems, and leaves are the organs of plant. A leaf is an organ that makes food for the plant. The roots of plant are the main organ in the root system of a plant. The heart, lung, brain are examples of animal organs. Our heart is organ which contains muscle tissue, nerve tissue, and blood tissue, and it pumps blood throughout our body. Furthermore, when we talk about the organ systems which work together, so life processes like breathing and digestion can be carried out, keeping many celled organisms like we healthy and alive. When a group of parts work together, they perform a system. A group of organs working together to carry out a specific function is called an organ system. Plants' roots, stem, and leaves are an organ system, whereas our digestive system is an organ system, which contains our mouth, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, and liver. Digestion breaks down the food and absorb nutrients we need to live. So here, in short, we can conclude that a cell is the smallest unit of living matter, the building blocks of living things. Tissues are groups of cells working together to perform a certain function. Organs are groups of tissues that perform a certain function. And organs working together to carry out a certain life function are an organ system. Finally, we will be going to talk about the circulatory system, which is responsible for transporting materials throughout our entire body. It transports nutrients, water, and oxygen to our billions of body cells and carries away waste such as carbon dioxide that body cells produce. It is an amazing transport system throughout our entire body, connecting to all our body cells, where the organ is the heart. If you talk about the tissues and the cells, here blood vessels, arteries, veins, capillaries, blood, red blood cells, plasma. These are the human circulatory system. So with this, I'm going to conclude here today's lesson. I'll be back with the further part of the lesson. Till then, thank you and goodbye. Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to online classes for the grade 6 in the subject science. Dear boys, here we are going to start with the new chapter, that is chapter 2, cells. And from this chapter we are going to study the lesson 1, that is cell theory. We are going to study this lesson from the pages 84 to 87. So let's open the page 84 and we are going to start the lesson of cell theory. Before going to start the lesson, let's see what are the learning objectives of the today's lesson. Dear boys, we are going to know here about what is cell, how are cell discovered, developing a cell theory, cells and organism. These are the learning objectives of the today's lesson. Now let's start our lesson from page 84. Here, firstly, we are going to talk about the cell and how were cells discovered. That we are going to see here in the today's lesson. So, dear boys, here all living things where we are going to learn about the cell theory. In this, particularly the history of the cell, about the cell theory and different types of cells we are going to learn. Let's talk about what is cell. Cell is a basic unit of structure and function in living organisms. There are many different types of cells, each with their own specific function that acts as the building blocks of living organisms. Here, the English scientist named Robert Hooke was the first person to observe a cell. He was also the first to use the term cell to describe what he saw. In the year 1965, Hooke made a microscope and used it to examine thin slices of cork. Using magnification, Hooke was able to see the walls of cork tissue, which he described as many little boxes or cells. So, after Robert Hooke, the Dutch businessman named Anton van Leeuwenhoek was the first person to observe unicellular organisms. He ground and polished lenses until he produced a microscope that was 9 times more powerful than the one which was made by Hooke. Here, boys, further to this, Leeuwenhoek, who observed many tiny living things with the microscope and drew each new discovery as details as his drawings of bacteria, yeast, and blood cells were for our understanding of cell structure increased greatly over the years of microscopes were improved. In year 1831, Scottish scientist Robert Brown discovered the nucleus of a plant cell, and thereafter the German scientist Matthias Schilden used a microscope to observe plants. In 1838, Schilden conducted and he concluded that all plants are made up of cells. After a year, the scientist Theodor Schwann, who is also from the Germany, discovered that animals are made up of cells. Schilder and Schwann built on the work of Hooke, Leeuwenhoek, and Brown to develop the cell theory, where the cells can only arise from pre-existing cells, according to Rudolf. Here, the cell theory says the 3 main points, which belongs to the cell is the basic unit of structure of all life. The cell is the basic unit of function of all life, and all cells arise from pre-existing cells. So when you talk about the cells and organism, there some organisms are made up of single cell and some made up of many cells. The number of cells in a tall tree or an animal, like here an elephant or human being, are billions and trillions of cells. So the organisms made up of many cells are called multicellular organisms, whereas the organisms made up of only one cell are called unicellular organism. And the examples are bacteria, paramaecium, euglena are unicellular organisms. Whereas when you move on to the picture of paramaecium, here you are going to see here it is a large protist which use small hairs called cilia to help with movement. You can observe this in these pictures, where euglena is another example of unicellular organism. As we said that these multicellular organisms, they are being made of more than one cells, and they perform a variety of specialized functions. So here, look at our body has different types of cells that make up our skin, nerves, blood and muscles. So with this, we are going to conclude here the today's lesson. I'll be going to continue with the further part of the lesson. Till then, thank you and goodbye.